Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping right into a really compelling chapter in Donald Trump's financial story. We're looking at those major hurdles he faced, especially, the casino bankruptcies back in the early 1990s.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. We're drawing from a couple of sources. There's a YouTube video, The Rise and Fall of Donald Trump Business Successes and Failures, and also some text that actually frames this whole period as a comeback story. It calls him the comeback king, even.
Right, quite the contrast, because you have this image, this brand, built on luxury, huge buildings, massive success,
Yeah.
and then, bam, the early 90s hit, and you see these, jaw-dropping bankruptcies, as one source puts it.
It really felt like he was on the brink. The narrative at the time was maybe this is it. The empire's crumbling.
Exactly. So our mission here, for you listening, is to kind of unpack that. How did he actually navigate that crisis? What was going on in terms of mindset, strategy?
And importantly, what lessons, if any, can you maybe draw from that about financial resilience, for your own challenges, whatever the scale might be?
Okay, let's set the scene. Atlantic City, late 80s, early 90s. Trump dives in headfirst with the casinos.
Oh, absolutely. Big ambitions. You look at the Trump Taj Mahal, opened in 1990. It wasn't just another casino. The plan was for it to be like the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah.
That was the pitch.
Huge and incredibly flashy, right? All the gold trim, luxury, everything. Must have caused quite a stir initially.
It definitely got attention, yeah. But that extravagance, it came at a serious cost. Just building the Taj Mahal ran about, $1 billion?
$1 billion, wow.
And that directly fed into what the video calls massive debts, just huge amounts of borrowing.
And it's not just the building costs, right? Running a place that big, the operating expenses must have been enormous too.
Exactly. Very high running costs. Plus, Atlantic City was getting more competitive, more casinos popping up.
So the money coming in maybe wasn't keeping pace?
That's the picture painted. The revenues weren't enough to really cover those huge debt payments and the day-to-day costs. Things started to underperform.
And this links back to his general approach, doesn't it? Taking on billions in loans, as the source says, to fund these big projects. Fast growth, but maybe high risk.
It seems that way. That aggressive borrowing made him quite vulnerable when the real estate market turned downwards in the early 90s.
Right.
The video specifically mentions his properties, the casinos, hotels. They all started underperforming. It wasn't just one project.
So the banks must have been getting nervous. Pressure building. What happens next?
Well, yeah, the lenders started putting on the squeeze. He was basically forced to restructure his debts. It was a critical moment.
And this is where we see the bankruptcies.
Yes, but it's important distinction. He personally avoided bankruptcy. That's key. But several of his businesses, especially the casinos, Trump Plaza, Trump Marina, the Taj Mahal, they filed for Chapter 11.
Chapter 11, okay. That's the reorganization one, not liquidation.
Right. It allows a business to keep operating while sorting out its debts. But the video notes, there were 6 such filings across his businesses between 91 and 2009. So it wasn't just a one-off hiccup for the casinos.
6 times. That's significant. And restructuring isn't just paperwork, is it? He had to make real changes, sell things off.
Absolutely. He had to raise cash fast. So he sold some very visible assets. The video highlights his yacht, the Trump Princess, and his airline, the Trump Shuttle.
Selling the yacht and the airline, those are pretty big signals that things are serious.
Definitely. Very public signs of the financial strain.
Now, Trump's perspective on these bankruptcies has often been that they were, strategic. A business tool to survive, regroup, pay creditors eventually.
That's one framing, yes. A way for the business entity to get breathing room.
But there's another side to that coin, isn't there? What about the impact on others?
Right. The counterpoint raised is that these bankruptcies meant thousands of workers and small contractors were left unpaid. So, strategic for the core business, maybe, but with real consequences for many people and smaller companies involved.
Okay, so you've got this massive financial pressure, bad headlines everywhere. This is where that comeback king idea comes in. What drove him through that? What was the mindset?
Well, the text piece really pushes this idea of an unwavering refusal to quit, just sheer persistence despite everything seemingly going wrong. That determination seems key to the narrative.
But it wasn't just grit, right? There had to be actual moves, negotiations.
Oh, definitely. He was apparently in direct talks with dozens of banks, and the text points out something important. He leveraged his personal guarantee.
Meaning his own money was on the line.
Exactly. If the businesses went under completely, the banks could potentially go after his personal assets. That gave the banks a reason to, negotiate rather than just foreclose. It gave him leverage.
Sounds like pretty tough, high-stakes talks.
Described as Aggressive renegotiation.
Yeah. Pushing for better deals, lower interest rates, longer payback times, maybe even swapping some debt for equity, meaning the banks would own a piece of the business.
And that process was public.
Often very public, yeah. Which adds another layer of pressure. It was described as painstaking.
And part of that painful process was letting go of assets, even prized ones.
Yes, that willingness to sell off non-core or underperforming assets, the yacht, the airline examples of cutting losses to raise cash and focus resources. It shows a certain pragmatism, perhaps, amidst the crisis.
So he gets through the worst of it, avoids personal bankruptcy, stabilizes things. But then there's a shift, right? He adapts his strategy, learns.
Yeah, this seems to be a really important evolution. After the early 90s, you see less focus on him building and owning everything himself and more on licensing the Trump name.
The brand itself becomes the product almost. Exactly. The Trump brand was valuable. So instead of sinking huge capital into building a hotel and taking all the risk, he could license his name to other developers for their hotels, golf courses, whatever.
Less capital needed, less risk for him, but still generating revenue.
Precisely. It's highlighted as a major strategic shift, leveraging the brand equity he built.
And then along comes The Apprentice in 2004. That must have turbocharged the brand value.
Oh, massively. The YouTube source calls it the moment he became a pop culture phenomenon. Suddenly he's on TV every week. That catchphrase, "you're fired," is everywhere.
Yeah, inescapable for a while there.
It just reintroduced him or introduced him to a whole new generation. And it wasn't just the show's success.
It opened other doors.
Absolutely. New income streams, marketing deals tied to the show, promoting real estate, all sorts of consumer products. It just amplified the brand's reach and value enormously.
So it seems like maybe he learned from being over-leveraged before, still taking risks maybe, but structuring things differently.
The sources suggest perhaps a change in the scale or structure of deals, maybe more focus on partnerships or licensing, managing that downside risk differently after the bruising experience of the early 90s. Still ambitious, but maybe shrewder about the financial structure.
But not every venture worked out perfectly even after that period, right? Like the Trump shuttle airline you mentioned earlier.
That's a good point. The video uses the shuttle as an example where his focus on, extreme luxury just didn't match what the market wanted for short-haul flights.
Too expensive, maybe? Not practical enough?
Something like that. It ended up back with the creditors by 92. So it shows that even with the brand and the recovery, success wasn't automatic if the business model itself wasn't right for the market.
And we should probably briefly touch on Trump University, too. That wasn't straightforward.
No, that led to significant legal challenges, allegations of fraud, and eventually a $25 million settlement. So that's definitely part of the later business story. Another hurdle he navigated, albeit with significant costs.
Okay, so looking back at this whole roller coaster, the huge buildup, the near collapse, the rebuilding, the brand reinvention, what are the core lessons here for you listening, thinking about your own financial journey?
Well, the narrative that emerges, especially from that comeback king angle, is definitely one of unbreakable financial resilience. And whether you agree with all the methods or outcomes, there are probably some transferable ideas there.
Okay, like what? What are the main takeaways?
First, maybe seeing setbacks not just as failures, but as, learning opportunities. Tough ones, for sure, but chances to see what went wrong and maybe adjust.
Okay, learn from adversity. Makes sense.
Second, just the power of persistence, not giving up easily on financial goals, even when things look bleak. That kind of ties into the never give up mindset highlighted.
Right, that determination was clearly a factor. What else?
Having an actual strategy for recovery. It wasn't just about hoping. It involved concrete plans, negotiating debt, changing spending, finding new income. You got to have a plan.
Actionable steps.
Yeah. And negotiation skills were obviously huge in his case. Being able to talk to lenders, make deals. That's a valuable skill in almost any financial situation.
Even if it's just negotiating a credit card rate, maybe.
Exactly. The scale is different, but the principle applies. Also, adapting. Being willing to change your approach if what you're doing isn't working, like his shift to licensing. Maybe for individuals, that means finding new income, learning new skills, changing investment tactics.
Being flexible.
Yes. And finally, maybe the most crucial thing, mental fortitude. Staying calm, focused, reasonably optimistic under pressure. Financial stress is incredibly tough. Managing that mental side is key.
So quite a story of navigating extreme financial turbulence and ultimately rebuilding. It really does highlight how important resilience is in finance, doesn't it?
It really does. And it leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder. We talked about debt restructuring, brand reinvention on this massive scale, but think about the basic ideas there. How might those principles of facing debt head on, of maybe reinventing your own brand or skills, of just bouncing back applied to managing your own finances during tough times? What's the core idea of resilience that really sticks with you?